Yo, what's going on, guys? Going to be going over the strongest junglers to carry solo queue with. This list is going to be based primarily around iron through diamond, and it's going to be based around ranked solo queue, not really duo queue. There's lots of criteria such as ease ability to master, ease ability to use, first pick, blind pick. I'll try to justify some of the spicier positions. First up on the list is Nefiri. She is solidly in S tier. Nah, I'm just kidding, guys. She's legit F tier. Her main issue is her ganks are extremely underwhelming, no real CC. Yeah, she has decent gap closing potential, but so do really every jungler on this list, or at least the ones in the high tier. On top of that, her sustain isn't the best. It's very easy to kill her while she's clearing, and she needs so much gold income that she's taking all the gold as a jungler, not letting her bot lane really shine, and then she's squishy. So when she goes into a fight, it's kind of hard for her to get out, and she's squishy, so she dies. Next up is Aatrox. He is also solidly in F tier, although Aatrox is a bit better than Nefari because of his ganks, sustain, and overall durability. Next up on the list, we have Morgana. She sits solidly in E tier. She still has great ganks, solid clears, but she does struggle a lot, particularly against AD ranged junglers, people who can consistently dodge her snare, like Kindred and Graves. Very hard to deal with, and Kindred and Graves are both very viable right now. And there's also other very mobile junglers who are giving her issues, but she's definitely an okay pick. And then after her is Brand. Once again, guys, every jungler I've put in this list has once been highly viable at one point in time, or has specifically received buffs at some point to be a jungler. I am not putting in random champions. Brand's not quite on the same level as Morgana because he doesn't have the black shield to help enhance his AD carry, which is the most important role in the game right now, at least in the mid and late game. 10 times over. So without the black shield and without the same level of hard CC, Brand does have to sit behind her. Then of course we have Garen. I'm only going to put her in front of Morgana because he's easier to play and you can just run in and be a tank. But otherwise, if you're playing Morgana at a higher level, she will actually be more useful than a Garen. Next up is Darius. Darius jungle, passive, 300% bonus damage against monsters, decent enough ganks with his hook. He also has a slow. His main issue is getting to people to begin with, so playing him Predator becomes more and more tempting. But if you run Predator Darius, then you can't solo the enemy jungler very easily because you're missing out on the Conqueror damage output. That being said, he sits solidly in the D tier. If you can build up a gold lead on him or have some successful ganks, he's an absolute monster. Next up is Teemo. Teemo is a very good pick, especially if the enemy team is auto attack heavy with things like Xin Zhao, Vayne, even things like Graves, Kindred. He's very, very solid. He's got good clears because he has bonus damage against monsters. His blind dart blinds monsters twice as long as everything else, so you don't really get auto too much by red, blue, or grump. Plus with the wolves, you can blind the big wolf, which is the primary source of damage. So Teemo, very solid. We'll put him in D tier. He has good scaling and overall a really good champ, I'd say. But he does have to sit in D tier because his ganks do lack. He doesn't have true hard CC. The blind dart doesn't hold the enemy still. They just run away from you. So blinding them doesn't really give you much of a leg up. His mid and late game kind of make up for that. So that's why we're sticking him in the D tier. Next up is Blitzcrank. At one point, he was S++ tier. Then Riot has slowly cut back on him being a jungler. So placing him anywhere past F tier, I think would be a bit of a crime, and in fact I absolutely do not want Blitzcrank jungle on my team, so we'll put him firmly in the F tier. He's still a lot of fun to play though, don't get me wrong. Then we have Malphite. Malphite is extremely slept on, especially in lower elo where things play out slower and ultimately the game devolves into just 5v5 team fights somewhere around the 20-minute mark. Malphite is perfect for this. You can play him AP, you can play him tank. His clears are good enough, especially with Riot putting his passive on a shorter cooldown a while back. You can definitely use his passive multiple times during your initial clear because it's only 8 seconds instead of its former 10. That being said, putting Malphite any higher than D tier would be a little aggressive, although I think if you did start to one trick him and you weren't playing him anywhere past probably platinum, I think you could argue him into C or B tier, but for here, safe to put him in D. Next up is Jax. He's in a similar category as Teemo where you only tend to pick him against champions who have a lot of auto attacks. It's very tricky to actually put him in the high tier, but picked in the right circumstances, champions like Jax and Teemo can easily float up into B tier. But generally speaking, Jax does tend to sit down towards the lower tiers. He needs a higher gold income. With that being said, solid ganks, a straightforward build path. Jax definitely would be sitting in C tier, but he did get nerfed recently. It was mainly focused towards Jax top, but Jax jungle took the hit all the same. So he's D tier instead of low C tier. Next up on the list, we have Ornn. Ornn is an interesting jungler because he doesn't really have to base unless he's out of health or mana because he can build his items on the Rift. The unfortunate thing is it does take a while to actually build the item. It takes somewhere around 4 or 5 seconds. So it's not like you can instantly do it and move on, but still It's really nice to be able to take Predator on Ornn, buy yourself boots at the end of your 3 camp clear or full clear, and then gank with your Predator boots. So Ornn, I think he easily makes it into E tier. He's a solid enough tank as a jungler. He's got okay clears and I say above average ganks. And next up we have Nidalee. She tends to be much stronger and higher elo and still kind of annoying to have on your team on regions like NA where people don't know how to end games early in general. And in lower elo she can definitely be tricky to pull off. She is in a solid spot right now, so we'll toss her E tier. She's still Darkseal and Measure reliant, so do keep that in mind when playing her. If you're not willing to build Darkseal or Measure on her, she has absolutely zero scaling whatsoever. Rengar, a couple patches ago, he definitely would have been somewhere in A tier or even S tier. He sustained some nerfs and some of his items have been pegged down as well, making him a bit trickier to pull off, and Rengar main's definitely floundering a bit. So we'll toss him down here in D tier, straight ahead of these guys. We'll put him right here. He does tend to fall off really hard in the late game. He needs to play from a snowball lead, and if you die more than a few times on him and give up your shutdown golds, it's going to be a bad time. Then we have Gwen. She is solidly in the F tier. Lots of carry potential, weak clears and weak ganks though. If you can make it to the late game and be fed or mid game and not be behind, she's okay. Next up is Zed. Zed also in the F tier. He's received buffs to specifically be a jungler. He's not that great at those ganks. All he has is a slow and a dash, and it really just doesn't cut it. A lot of times when you end up picking him, your team is just full squishy. A lot of times being the tank falls on the support or the jungler. The top laner is typically a bruiser. So if you're playing Zed jungle and your support locks in something squishy, puts your team in a tough team comp position, and Zed can't frontline very well. He used to be able to do it better when Ravenous was super OP. Gave Omni Vamp instead of physical Vamp. Omni Vamp's even like healing from abilities, but now it's just life still. So Zed definitely F tier jungle right now. Camille, she's absolute poop. Don't play it. I'd say she's even worse than Blitz. She just can't clear. Next up is Choder. He's secretly kind of broken as a jungler. He is slower paced, but his scaling is kind of crazy. People definitely don't give him enough love and attention. Extremely underplayed, and overall a solid carry. We'll put him right here behind Jax for now. And then we have Gragas, Darkseal Magic Abuse champ. Easy to stay alive on because he has an AoE slow, he has a knock up and a dash, and then he's got an AoE knock with his R. Gragas is behind Jax. If you can manage to keep your Darkseal and Mesh up though, he's easily a B tier champion because good ganks and keep your Darkseal and Mesh up. Good scaling. Had a lot of fun with this champ, but if you struggle to keep up Darkseal and Mesh, this champ's very hard to make work because he's not as tanky as a tank and doesn't do as much damage as mages unless you have Darkseal or Mesh. Next up is Karthus. He has the best clear in the game, obviously S tier. Nah, I'm just kidding. So basically, even though Karthus has the fastest clear in the game, like even leashless, he's not that good because jungle camps don't give enough golden XP early on. Like jungle, it does hit level 3 faster than any role in the game, but after level 3, I'd say after level 3 and 4, you hit level 5 and 6 later than top and mid, and then you continuously are under level compared to top and mid, to where Karthus being a heavy full clearer kind of works against him right now. Even though his ganks are decent, it's just not worth it. He's so mobile. There's lots of champs that can burst him out and get away, whether it's a Fizz or a Zed, Talon, Evelynn, Rengar, Kha'Zix, truly any kind of assassin or long range champ. And there's plenty of champs that outrange him, whether it's a Xerath, a Ziggs, Ezreal abilities, Twitch on R. There's other things I just can't think of right now, but yeah, Karthus definitely struggling right now. Even if you're fed on him, it's easy to lose games on him, even if you're landing every Q, trust me. Putting this champion any higher than D, I think would be hard. And in fact, I'm going to put him lower than Darius just because he's that challenging to win with so many of the games, even if you're playing him right. And then we have Pantheon. He's very easy to play. He does tend to fall off. Pure ease of use. 3 camp into gank. Easily puts him in the D tier. We'll put him here right behind. Oh, that's a tough one. I'd say in front of Teemo, behind Rengar. I think this is a very fair spot to put him. Only reason I'm not putting him higher is his lack of scalability truly hurts him, and he's extremely one-dimensional in terms of what the enemies are to expect. It's not like the Rengar where you can heal off and cleanse and disengage. Once Pantheon goes in, he's typically stuck in the fight. Then we have Twitch, one of the highest carry potential champs in the game, but also one of the worst clearing champs in the game. Because of that, we're going to put him right here behind Teemo. One of Twitch's biggest upsides is you can play him AP or AD. If that wasn't the case, we'd have to put him even lower, but since he's extremely viable AP or AD, part of the reason why he's D tier instead of E tier. Then we have Sion, loads of bonus damage against monsters, and he gets loads of extra health against the large monsters in the camp. So Sion jungle, a huge scaler. His ganks, same issues Darius ganks, to where they're slow paced, the enemies see it coming, and they tend to struggle because of that. They tend to just run away. So we'll toss him into the E tier. If your team has the bigger backline though, he's definitely viable and you can cheese out some wins on him. But for now, we will toss him into the dirty E tier in front of Brand Morgana. Because he is easier to play, he's easier to survive on as well. He's just hard to gank on. Because you have to come up behind them, and even then, they tend to just walk away from you. So it is what it is. And then we have Ivern, formerly an S++ tier champion. Riot patches ago, it's probably 4 or 5 patches ago, gave him 3 distinct buffs. Each one nutty, each one huge, like a 10 out of 10 buff on its own. And they give him like 3 in the same patch. It was a Daisy, a shield, and then a something else buff. He's recently, though, he's sustained some big nerfs, especially this patch. They've reduced Daisy's damage output massively. They've reduced his shield AP scaling pretty big. And they've also reduced Daisy's duration from 60 seconds to 45, which is a big deal because if a good Ivern keeps Daisy alive, and if he keeps her alive until she dies naturally, then she's basically not even on cooldown. She's going to be around a 1 minute cooldown in the mid game. So you can basically perpetually keep her up. And now that she only lasts 45 seconds, there will be a noticeable gap in between daisies. So with that being said, Ivern's win rate, pick rate is tank. I can't put him any higher than D tier. Only reason we're putting him this high is because he's just so consistent. You can pick him pretty much every game as long as their team isn't full AP. But in terms of carrying games, it's a lot harder to do now on him. And now we have speed round. Silas, E tier. Clears suck, ganks are good. You pretty much has to 2-camp gank or 3-camp gank every single time. He's super easy to kill in his jungle. He just doesn't farm health. He's his biggest downside. His ganks are great though. Kiana at one point was viable as a jungler. It's been a wrong time. She's somewhere down here near the Zed. I feel comfortable putting her pretty much anywhere in here. Maybe behind Nefari or in front of her. It's hard to say. But I do think she's overall better than Nefari since she has double hard CC and her R is massive AoE CC. Next up is Quinn. Quinn jungle is a spicy pick with solid ganks. We'll put it in front of Blitzcrank behind Nefari just because her clears are poop, not good. Very slow. Xin Zhao, he's not bad by any means, but he's extremely average right now, struggling to differentiate himself from other AD junglers in the cast in a positive way. So we're going to have to toss him down into D tier. The question is where? Right around here. Behind Cho'Gath in front of Malphite, I think is fair. And Vi is actually of a similar fate. I would say she's worse than Xin though, because of her pre-6 ganks are a lot less consistent. If the enemies have flash, if they both dash, Xin slow connects every time. Every time it connects. Now, if Vi does her little dash and the enemies flash, Vi gets basically nothing. And Xin's knockup is not a skill shot. So Xin has a knockup and a slow pre-6. Vi only has a knock, which is not even as long as the Xin knockup. Xin ganks are way more consistent. That's the only real differentiating factor between these guys is the Xin pre-6 is quite a bit better. At 6, Vi ganks a bit better because of her R, but Xin tankier, so that kind of washes out. Pretty comparable though, especially in win rate, pick rate, and my own experience just playing them lately. And then we have Mundo. Tough champ, man. I mean, you can rush Sunfire on him, but if you don't go for Heartstill, his late game scaling is going to be questionable. Just like with any tank junglers, it's easily justifiable if the enemy team is full AP or full AD. There's so many build options or item options these days that I find it harder and harder to pull off tank champions realistically because the enemies just have so many choices in what items to build. Like even an AD carry item going static shiv and getting lots of magic damage while still getting AD and crit out of the item is freaking nuts. So it's not easy to pull off Mundo, but he's decent enough. I'll put him in front of Karthus. That's how I feel about Karth right now. Then we have Nasus. He's unironically a god tier carry. You need to learn how to farm. You need to learn how to be patient on him early on. Once you're 6, if you're not behind, you kind of just win by default. We'll toss him C tier. Huge carry, guys. There's people playing this champion like EU Western Korea who are Masters Plus. Like he's a legit champ. If you're playing him in low elo where the games last longer and things tend to be a little bit slower paced, there's lots of mistakes. He's just amazing. Absolutely amazing. Next up is Jarvan. Super consistent, blind pickable. Just don't play him if your team's full AD. He's a better version of Xin Zhao and Vi right now because just more versatile, much more blind pickable. Against Xin Zhao, an auto attack block champ will thrash him much harder than a J4. And even same with the Vi, with the way her 3 auto passive works. Jarvan honestly doesn't even really have to auto attack you to get max value in a team fight with his cage and with his knockup. It really is just on another level. Plus his shield, it's been buffed so much over time that landing a big AoE slow on him is so free. And he gets a bigger shield for it. So Jarvan definitely B tier right now. Behind Jarvan, we have some similar champions who are basically blind pickable. That is Hecarim. Hecarim does have bad matchups, but they're not necessarily jungle matchups. They're more of just kind of champions who have loads of hard CC. So maybe something like a Lissandra mid or an Ahri charm. Stuff like that can be hard for him to deal with since he has to go face check into fights. It's like running in, and he needs to stay mobile. He needs to keep spinning Q. Then we have Nocturne. Similar enough in terms of carry power. Nocturne is a bit easier to play than both these champs because he's always gonna full clear. Nocturne and Hecarim can both get away with abusing Duskblade right now because it's still a good item. Honestly, better off with not doing that. Like Nocturne going for Stridebreaker is really, really good. Hecarim, he can go for Duskblade, but he still does have plenty of other options. To finish out the B tier, we have Lilia with Graves. Lilia absolutely shreds tanks, great clears. Not good invades because she'll lose all of her prance, but her clears are good, her ganks are solid if you keep your prance up. Good team fighting. Overall, solid champ. She can get away with going for Zhonya's as well. Graves is only in B tier because Duskblade's overtuned right now. It lets him play kind of frontline heavy and not die because he can burst someone down, assuming the enemy team has at least one squishy champion. And he's just got lots of item choices at the moment. Next up on the list is Zac. He's been struggling a lot more in the current meta. He's not great, but he's also not terrible, and he does have a layer of consistency, playing tower defense, jumping in as enemies are on your turret, and then you can perma CC them underneath, letting your turret do the damage, because Zac inherently does lack damage output very heavily, especially in the early game. His first 5 levels are poop, but if you can get through it, make it to 6 without your teammates perma feeding, he is a solid champion, so we'll toss him in the C tier. And then we have Maokai. For whatever reason, Riot decided to nerf him this patch. It was a very small nerf though, so he's still in a solid spot. Did a Maokai jungle video recently. And yeah, he's got great ganks, just can't bot lane win the game. Next up is Viego. Viego, I'd say in a lot of ways, he's better than Master Yi, but at the same time, Master Yi has the best turret dives in the whole game, pre-6. So you can't really put Viego up at the same level, although his carry potential truly is at that same level. It's just that his early game can't really match. So we'll go ahead and toss him into the C tier in front of Maokai. They should let him go back into Viego mode pre-6 whenever he goes inside of people, because normally at 6 you can use your R to go back into Viego mode. That is something that's kind of annoying about Viego in the early games. You can be really penalized for going inside of somebody. And then we have Amumu, not in the best spot. Riot doesn't typically like to keep him the most viable because he's pretty easy to play and he doesn't cost a lot of blue essence. So if Mumu is the best jungler in the game, then there's really no incentive for people to play anything else. He's already such a low bar to entry. His clears are not the fastest. They're not necessarily the healthiest. His ganks are definitely a little above average. He does have the issue of his Q getting blocked by minions or pets like Heimerdinger turrets or just the minions in general. It's pretty annoying, but if you come up from behind, his ganks are definitely above average. He's got good scaling and very easy, very strong team fighting. Then we have Nunu. He's a bit stronger than Amumu right now just because dragons are so overtuned. Nunu can secure them much better in the early game than Amumu. And it really is that simple. Other than that, Amumu is probably a bit easier to play. Nunu has better ganks pre-6 at level 6. Amumu has better ganks. But yeah, it's really, do you want the first 5 levels or level 6 and up? Do you want the early drags or do you want to try to fight for the late game drags? Because they're both AP champs. They're both kind of tanky as well. Although you can play Amumu full AP, don't necessarily recommend it. If you do, probably just go phase rush anyways. Next up is Echo. We're going to go ahead and throw him right here in front of Nidalee just because his late game's way better and games tend to drag on iron through diamond. So we'll put him right in here behind the Nasus. You can abuse Dark Shoulder or Mej on him, but you don't necessarily have to hard carry games. Just don't be dying in your jungle and path smart depending on the matchup. You can't always full clear on him. Sometimes you have to have creative clears. If the enemy jungle is something like a Graves or a Shaco. Next up is Kindred. She's going to go in front of Echo. She has been nerfed down a little bit. Trinity Force has been nerfed down a little bit. She's still very solid. Just don't play too heavy for marks. Like marks don't win you the game. Winning the game gets you marks. Like there's a clear difference. You can win the game with 0 marks on Kindred. Marks just make it a bit easier. So never get yourself killed for a mark in general. Next up is Ral. She was turbo buffed to be a jungler a while back, and then they small buffed her and then they small nerfed her or something like that. So it all pretty much washed down to her getting a huge buff. And I did a video on her. I think I might have done multiple. She's pretty nuts, man. She's so good at ganking. Her clears are honestly pretty solid as well. And her team fighting's very good. She's very similar to Amumu, except her ganks are better because her CC cannot be blocked by minions. Like her CC just goes through everything. So yeah, she has a speed up for her and her allies as well. So she had 2-person speed up with a big dash knock up and then with the stun. So yeah, she's definitely a high C tier. I would personally put her higher, but I don't think people will take that seriously. She's I wouldn't say she's unexplored, but people just haven't really given her the time of the day. So people really just are not going to take her seriously. But she's very, very good. She could easily be put into B tier or even A tier, especially at a higher level. Now, her damage output is not the highest, but if you do have red buff or as long as you're fighting with your teammates, it's totally fine. But she's not the type of champion to go in the enemy jungle and solo kill them. Then we have have Trist, fun little off-meta pick jungler. She's one of the few junglers in here, her and Quinn, who I don't believe have ever received buffs to be a jungler. Off the top of my head, these are the only two. So with that being said, she's actually pretty good at it for not receiving any buffs. We're going to have to put her E tier. We'll put her in front of Brand, actually. Next up is Bel'Veth. To me, she's a worse version of Viego because she doesn't really have an ultimate. Viego's R is highly impactful. You know what's happening, and it's very visual. Her R, it's basically just a stat check that doesn't necessarily mean anything, and the turret still hits you, so just like with the Viego, to where Bel'Veth is not personally my cup of tea. It's also easy to forget little things on her, like picking up Rift Coral or the Herald if you're tired. So I'm not going to count that part into why I'm ranking her where she is. I'm just saying, I'm just adding that part on, a little tack on the end. But for me, it really is her super weak early game. Her ganks are, I mean, you could argue that they're average. That's fine, but her ganks certainly aren't great. The only thing she really has going for her in terms of being above average in ganking is tanking turrets with her channel. But outside of that, she truly is a D tier Daryl. She's not made for anything outside of D tier for right now. She's hard to keep balanced though, her and Viego, because of kind of how their resets work. Her with her R and obviously Viego with his R. Next up is Evelynn. She is pretty easy to play, solid full clears, decent enough ganks, probably above average ganks just because her charm isn't a skill shot. So as long as you're coming from behind, it's almost guaranteed. She's definitely A tier right now, at least if you look on pick rate and win rate. In my opinion, she's a lot worse. She's somewhere in low B tier, but she is very easy to play, is the truth of it. So just make sure you're going for drags and you're good to go. In front of her, I would toss up Diana. Diana has much better results in terms of just raw consistency, especially across multiple builds. Full AP Diana, bit tanky Diana, very tanky Diana. She can use Jackshow, Sunfire, Demonic, Zhonya's. She has many more item options and varieties and team fight styles. She can go for Nash, but she goes for Nash every game, and she can stay in the thick of the fight, unlike Evelynn. So, and on top of that, her ganks are better. She's got the double dash, and it's easier for her to keep her Dark Sealer mesh stacks up since she's got the shield on W. So yeah, Diana literally is just a better version of Evelynn right now, in my opinion, for team fighting, ganking, and solo fighting people, just straight up. In front of her is Master Yi though. Master Yi is just legit better for, if you count his dive potential, he does have better ganks in her. Like in terms of just a normal gank, yeah, Diana gank better. Longer range dash, 2 dashes, potentially 2 dashes. But the Master Yi can dodge a turret shot with Q completely, mostly mitigate a turret shot with his W, right? So you can take like 2 shots. Keep in mind, turret does more damage per consecutive shot against champs. So if the first 2 shots don't do too much, it's like, it hurts, right? But it's not going to kill you. Shot 3 and 4, that's a little bit different. Master Yi can mitigate shot 3, dodge turret shot 4, and swap it to his teammate. Like, that's nuts. He can do that all level 3, right? He doesn't need level 6. So he is without a doubt the single best turret dive champ in the game. Elise doesn't compare. She just doesn't. Elise can only repel 1 turret shot and swap aggro. Master Yi, no. You can do essentially 2. So Master Yi, easy A tier, great scaling, pretty easy to play, good clears, good solo potential, highest base move speed of the game at 355. I'd say Rumble, he's in a similar category as Evelynn and Diana. He's a bit trickier to pull off because you have to pay attention to his heat. So he's not the type of champion you can autopilot on and carry. You really have to be paying attention to what you're doing. That being said, I think he is in D tier. He's basically a harder version of Karthus because of the heat, but once you get the heat down, I would say he's high D tier. But if you're just kind of picking him up, you watched one guide, he's going to kind of be a low D tier, for at least at the moment. He used to be much better seasons ago, but he's been nerfed down, of course. I didn't like him being a god tier jungler. Next up is Shen. Shen is a solid jungler, good ganks, not the best clears in the world, good scaling, good R for team fights. We're gonna have to toss him down in E tier, put him, I would honestly say right in front of Ornn is a good spot. Then we have Elise. Elise is in a similar camp as Nidalee, where her scaling is non-existent unless she's abusing Dark Sealer mesh and managing to keep the stacks up. They have kind of bad clears, to be honest. They rely more on ganking or invading. They can be tricky to pull off for sure. And them not doing well in the late game is a huge concern. So I'd say we have to put Elise down in D tier. We're going to put her behind Malphite. And you might be saying, well, why is Nidalee higher? They're basically identical champions. The only real difference is obviously Elise has better ganks with the stun and dive, without a doubt. I'd say Iron through Diamond though, orchestrating dive solo queue is kind of rough. With that being said, Nidalee can heal people. The heal aspect is ridiculously useful in a meta where AD carry decides the game 9 out of 10 games in the late game. So having that heal and attack speed steroid for your AD carry is kind of nuts. Only reason why I'm putting Nidalee so much higher than the Elise. Then we have Set. He's definitely in F tier, better than Blitz. He's not quite at the same level as Nefari, or is he? I think his clears are worse, so we'll put him behind. Then we had Ezreal. At one point, he was a meta jungler. I forget why. There's just something about it where we were seeing Ezreal jungle a lot, just like with the Graves jungle. But we'll put him we'll put him behind Quinn in front of Blitz. He doesn't have hard CC. He doesn't have a great way of staying on top of people like the Quinn dash. Quinn dash attaches to people even if they're flashing or dashing. Then we have Fiddlesticks. Fiddlesticks is extremely blind pickable. That's why we'll give him a D tier. No, I'm just kidding. Fiddlesticks, extremely blind pickable. You can only build AP, of course. Amazing hard CC that can counter out players who are far superior to your own skill level, to where even if you're playing against some of the best players in the world, a 2-second Fiddlestick sphere is still a 2-second Fiddlestick sphere. It doesn't matter how good they are when you press that on their head. And that's why he is so high up on here. Plus, he has, I believe, the second fastest clear in the game. If you have it highly optimized, it's still the second fastest. But still, I mean, one of the fastest clears in the game, healthiest clear in the game, easiest clear in the game. He is definitely A tier material. Even if you have a bad computer, bad internet, he is an insane jungler. Very, very strong in the meta. Highly recommend it. Skarner, kind of poop feces, but not as bad as he's been in the past. He is not great. He's barely above these turds, but not by much. These guys are very close in this turd sandwich, just packed together tight. It's hard to differentiate them. They're all starting to look the same. Then we have Talia. I'm a huge fan of her. She has massive gank potential. I've done various Talia jungle guides in the past couple of months, and she's an absolute beast. I personally enjoy playing her. I think her clears are great once you just get it down a little bit. Her ganks are great. Her scaling is great. If you learn how to land skill shots, her ganks are great. With that being said, she is finicky to play, so I will toss her into C tier. And we'll toss her towards the back end of C tier just because she's challenging to play. But once you get her down, I think she's an easy B tier option. And since she's typically a mid laner, I'd say, ban a mid lane champ, ban like Ahri or something. And they'll think you're playing at mid. They won't even try to pick a weird assassin to kill you in your jungle. They'll just pick something more normal. Alrighty, next up is Tryndamere. Tryndamere is one of my favorite off-meta junglers. We'll toss him in front of these turd burglars. He has a lot of carry potential, but at the same time, Gale Force did just get turbo nerfed a few patches ago, I think. It went from a 90-second cooldown to I think 120-second cooldown. That hurt him really bad, so we'll put him here. We'll toss Garen behind the Scion. Actually, man, do I really want to put Garen in front of Morg? All right, this is a better spot. I like that. That makes more sense to me because Morgana ganks realistically way better than Garen ganks. Her clears are about the same, maybe a little bit harder, but it should be about the same healthiness and clear speed. Then we have Talon. He's honestly in the same camp as Talia. We'll put him behind her. Yeah, we'll put him in front. He's a bit easier to play. Since he can't abuse Darksteel and Mijayas, he can't take advantage of that. Carry potential isn't quite as good, but he's quite a bit easier to play, I'd say. Then we have Warwick. Warwick is a champion of the people. Everyone loves this champ because he's aesthetically pleasing. He's easy to relate to because people have pets. And yeah, so Warwick. It doesn't really have to do with the placement, but I will say he is relatively easy to use in terms of getting maximum value out of him. It's not that hard. His Q's an auto reset. His Q goes through displacements. His R goes through everything in midair. There's not a whole lot to understand about this guy. We'll toss him in front of Jax. This is a very fair spot. He struggles in his clears, guys. His ganks are decent. If you can come up from behind, all right, they're decent. You can solo dragon, sure, most junglers can. But guys, come on. He can't clear his camps. You can't take anything. Like, besides red, blue, and Gromp, those are the only things he can clear at a reasonable rate. Outside of that, it's sad. It really is. They need to make team mat cheaper. But I've shown Warwick routes and stuff to help minimize that, so check those videos out. Next up is Trundler. Trundle is a turd burglar. Honestly, pretty trash champ. Put him here in front of Skarner. He belongs down here with these guys. It's really D tier and up is solid. Anything in D tier and up, I wouldn't mind having on my team. Next up is Udyr. We're going to throw him into a D tier. Question is where? I think behind. This is a good spot because his ganks are decent, kind of like Warwick ganks. Where he comes in slow, but once he's on you, he can be a bit sticky. His team fighting is questionable because you kind of need the bigger backline to do anything. Once he gets in, it's not necessarily easy for him to get out if the enemies have a proper CC chain. So yeah, Udyr definitely in the D tier. He's really not that impressive of a champion. I think he's just going to keep floating into obscurity. The best thing he had going for himself was when AD Udyr was God tier. Ever since that was turbo nerfed, he's just kind of gotten less and less played and more disappointing. Next up is Zyra. This champ was buffed, I think, patch or two ago. It was 2 patches ago. To be a jungler. Big jungle in the bunghole. She definitely fulfills that role in a similar way to the Morgana, except she does so much more consistently, in my opinion. Because of that, we're going to toss her into... Boom! Right here. Don't be salty, guys. She's unironically a better jungler than Warwick. Healthier clears in terms of speed. Honestly, she doesn't lose HP either. So healthier clears both ways. And and better ganks with the snare. So don't be mad. She's just better for right now. Warwick needs a buff, or they need to give him some kind of AoE clear tool so he doesn't have to be so over-reliant on T-Mat. Back when Ravenous earlier this season gave Omnivamp, it was a huge leg up for Warwick because he does so much magic damage. He needs something that rewards him in that way. Next up is Poop Kong. Poop Kong is E tier. We'll put him at the front of the pack because he's got double knockup. Having the double knockup being a big 2-item power spiker, kind of Divine Sunder Cleaver. Got that going for him. Then we have Riven. She's poop tier. We'll put her behind Blitz in front of Camille. Then we have Woolly Bear. He's one of my favorite junglers, although he falls off so freaking hard. We gotta toss him behind Weedwick. Although his clears are way better, his ganks are arguably better, or at least as good, and his level 6 is arguably way better because of the turret cancellation. He's just he's just a little bit trickier to pull off. Like for me, like realistically for me playing the game, I would put Volibear in C tier, but for you guys, like realistically, Warwick's gonna be better for you most likely, unless you're really willing to figure out Volibear and play him to his potential, because he does have a lot of potential, but at the same time his late game is poop doo-doo. All right, next up, Olaf. I don't know what happened to this champion. Time was not kind to him. I think item changes were rough. Ravenous Hydra getting nerfed all the time was rough. He just has not lasted well as a top lane or as a jungler or as anything. So we're gonna have to toss him down pretty low. We'll put him right here behind Nefari in front of Set. Then we have Lee Sin. Lee Sin, I'd say, is really not that great. He's kind of in the same category as Elise. Very good early game, horrible late game. Really not very good clears. Toss him in C tier. In front, we'll put him behind. I'm not going to give you guys the satisfaction of putting him in front of Talia. Then we have Poopy. She's actually really strong. Her clears are easy. Her clears are healthy. Her ganks are strong. She does tend to fall off hard in the late game. If you're picking her against champs that have lots of dashes, leaps, jumps, humbles, she can be rather good. But outside of that, her late game's poop, right in the C tier. Mord is extremely powerful. Just rush Rylai's, very easy to pull off. Just ban Vayne. Vayne makes him miserable to play, and we'll throw him behind Poppy. Super easy champ to play, very underrated. Easy clears, easy enough ganks. Like his ganks pre-6 are okay. They're pretty much average, but at 6 he gets funky real quick. Then we have Sejuani, very underplayed. For teams melee heavy, she's a great pick because they can help you to apply your stun rapidly. But all in all, tanks right now, in my opinion, they're not the best. I'd say the best tank jungler is probably Rel actually right now. It's kind of sad. He wasn't even born to be a jungler. Meanwhile, champions like Sej are really struggling it up. We'll go ahead and put her in front of Xin Zhao. Next up is Shaco Bako. He got a pretty sizable buff 2 patches ago. His late game still, I mean, not the greatest, but once he's level 3 with red buff, he's pretty fun to play. You can invade, you can gank. His level 3 with red buff, I mean, you have Ignite. Let's be honest, it's pretty great. But outside of that, you got to get that snowballing. That's the only way. Next up is Rek'Sai, still extremely consistent. She's a higher tech version of Kha'Zix, a little trickier to pull off, extremely rewarding. We'll put her behind Evelynn just because of her challengingness to use and her fact that she falls off so hard late game. Next up is Rammus, same issue as Sejuani. Tanks right now are just not that. Tanks do not cut the mustard. The only place to really put him, I'd say, is E tier. He's just that weak. Even if the enemy team's full armor, he's hard countered, man. Like the top junglers, like we have AP, and then we have Master Yi just straight up counters Rammus these days. It's so weird. Like Master Yi just beats him, and he's just so tricky to pull off. He's not rewarding. Even when you're ahead, he doesn't feel great. His clears are slow. His only camp he can take at a reasonable speed is Raptors, and that's about it. So we'll put him here behind Poop Kong. That's as good as he's going to get. Then we have Kayn. He's a solo pick, blind pick jungler. Can pick him just about every game. And even if your team's AD heavy, you can play AP Kayn. Not AP Kayn, but blue Kayn and have some magic damage. Next up is Kha'Zix. Kha'Zix going to drop him straight into B tier. Just kidding. Kha'Zix A tier. He's a beast right now. He has great item options. You can go Dustblade, you can go Eclipse, you can kind of go more bruiser mode if you really wanted to. All in all, he's a beast though. Once he's 6, I don't think there's a single champion can take Dragon faster than him. Level 6 Kha'Zix Q isolation, nuts in the butts. And yeah, guys, we actually don't have an S tier this video. I know it's strange, but jungle's just not in the best spot. Whoa, just kidding. Yeah, Siobhan is that good. At least Iron through Diamond. They gave her a tiny nerf. They took away like 2 health and 1 armor away from her this patch because she was so out of control. Let me tell you why she's S tier. Iron through Diamond. Yes, she's a slow starter. Yes, she has arguably the worst gank in the game out of any jungler pre-6. Her 6+ is insane. She has probably the fastest pre-6 dragon soloing capability in the game and one of the fastest at 6+. Because of her 20% bonus damage against dragons. And keep in mind, dragons are by far the most important objective in League. Another thing is she's dual damage. You can play her AD because of that recent buff they did to AD Shyvana. It's ridiculously viable. Or you could play her AP. So even if you first pick her, it doesn't matter what your teammates do. You can play her AD or AP. It doesn't matter. It's perfect. So her late game's insane. Her clears are decent. Her ganks pre-6 suck. But her late game is so good. Her dragon capability is good. And her level 6 is good enough to justify her horrible first 5 levels. And it really is that simple, guys. Shyvana is the bread and butter of the jungle for right now. If you want an easy, emphasis, an easy, straightforward gameplay experience with guaranteed nasty scaling and high options, AD or AP. So regardless of what your silly teammates do when you're forced to first pick, like nothing beats Shyvana right now. Iron through diamond. It really is that simple. That's just my thoughts, guys. I'm just one man making a tier list. Let me know if you agree, disagree, if you would have put a champion somewhere else. For example, if you think that Nefari is actually good, then you're a crackhead. But let me know. If you guys enjoyed this League of Legends tier list, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. It helps me out a lot. My name is King Sticks. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you guys next time.